I guess everyone is here to listen to the titans of scale. So let's give them a round of applause. And I'll pass the word to our panel moderator, Ariel Shin, who will present each panelist one by one.
Welcome, everyone, to today's panel, Titans of Scale, Strategies to Scale Security in Expanding Organizations. My name is Ariel. I'm a Product Security Engineering Manager at Twilio. And the goal of today's panel is to share real-world experiences, solutions, and hard-learned lessons when it comes to scaling security. As companies grow, so too does their technical debt, product features, and exposure to threats. An effective security team must adapt and scale its people's processes and tools. We have a great diversity of panelists today who have effectively scaled security at organizations of varying sizes and growth. We'll dive into how these leaders think about scaling when it comes to security teams, tooling, and programs. The format of this is that we have a Slido, I believe. Not exactly sure what the instructions are, but
BSidesSF.org/Q&A.
So please add your questions in there about anything about scale, and I'll be looking through that throughout this panel. And then we have some pre-prepared questions. So first up, I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves and what is their favorite technical book. We'll start with Julia.
I'm starting. My name is Julia Knecht, pronouns she, her. I work at Netflix. I lead our security platforms engineering team there. My favorite technical book, so I am a manager now, and so my favorite technical management book is, I've been thinking a lot about An Elegant System by Will Larson, great book. Yes.
Hey everyone, Mukund here. I lead our product security team at Chime. Favorite technical book? I think I would go with Building Reliable and Secure Systems by the Google SRE team. I think that's a real solid book for anyone getting into the space of building systems and just how do you go ahead by securing them.
I'm Singh, a longtime developer and then longtime security engineer. I'm running the product security team at Rippling. I haven't read in a long time. Mostly I have busy with my kids stuff, but I think the last one that I actually enjoyed was Moneyball, the book by Michael Lewis. Made me really think about metrics in a different way. So it's nice to just sort of pick apart the different type of metrics that we're using.
I'm Jacob Salassi. Been on IRC since 1992. Been leading the Snowflake. Been leading FNet, still on FNet. Anyway, been leading the Snowflake product security program for the last 5 years. And my favorite technical book is Write Great Code, volumes 1 and 2, not 3.
Okay, so for our first question for everyone, we'll start with Jacob for this one. What is one challenge you've come across with scaling at a large organization that audiences may not have considered?
So I think the answer for what it means to scale over time, something that I learned, or maybe the question, a hypothetical question, because there's too many people in here to throw out an answer, but like, it might be intuitive that the difference between supporting 10 and 100 developers is different, or 100 to 1,000 developers is different. But that the difference between 1,000 and 2,000 and 2,000 and 3,000 is quite different. It becomes more complex and there are more problems that you need to deal with. And what I found was that I did not anticipate those particular problems. And what you also learn at scale is that the things you fail to anticipate come with an increasingly high cost each time you fail to anticipate them. And then maybe the other thing I'll mention is that often your fate is going to be coupled with the maturity of the overall engineering organization, their developer practices, and the practices of the infrastructure teams that you're ultimately supporting, especially when you want to get opinionated, or rather reduce the amount of choice that's available.
All right, I guess I'm up next. I think I'll give a specific example for this. When we're working at Twilio, Ariel was actually on the team. We rolled out a different vulnerability management program. So it's completely different from what we were doing before. And rolling it out for a couple hundred people, no problem. You send them Slack messages, emails, people read it. When you roll a program out for several thousand people, no one's going to read their emails. No one reads their emails, no one reads their Slacks. So it's way harder to sort of figure out how do you actually roll out a program to multiple thousands of people. So Ariel did a great job where they went on roadshows and went to every single business unit and sort of explained what we're doing. But like when you're comparing small scale to large scale, you have a huge problem in communication. So that's always an interesting problem to solve.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of talk about like building a lot of developer tools, shift left, all of those work, but I think the biggest challenge you will face is, do you still have that collaborative culture with your engineering function? And if you do not have that, that's where your biggest challenges are going to be. So it's actually just meeting with all the business units, the leaders there, the managers there, the engineers there, having those conversations, keeping those conversations running, making sure that is a collaborative nature. That's actually what actually matters in the end of the day. I mean, sure, your tools and everything else is going to make things easier, but are you in talking terms with your different engineering teams and the rest of the functions is kind of what makes a difference.
Yeah, so at the end, everyone has already said the answers. But I think from my perspective, and maybe a little bit in summary, is I think like people are still people at the end of the day. That's very hard to scale. Communications, relationships are hard to scale. But you're also like trading a set of problems for a different set of problems. And those you're like maybe envisioning this world in which you're like, we've automated everything and it runs beautifully. And then you're like, but we don't have security ops anymore. We have engineering ops. And are we ready to pick up that challenge? Because it's a different skill set. It's a different set of people who might be doing that work. And so, yeah, I guess I would say, like, are you anticipating some of the problems because they're going to be different? And are you able to kind of like predict them enough to build out your teams for them?
We want to underscore that we're really amongst titans in the security industry with Netflix, Chime, Twilio, and Snowflake. I've heard just really great things about all of
Rippling.
My bad. Betrayed. But I've heard really great things about all of your programs. I'd love to hear about a specific program that you felt had failed and why.
Let's start in the middle.
I can start. So we did a fantastic program at Segment where we actually rolled out self-service threat modeling. So we taught all the developers how to threat model. No problem. I trained 80% of the org, 150, 200 engineers. Pretty easy to scale that. When I was looking at rolling it out at the Twilio scale, it was very problematic. How do you train several thousand engineers? And I was trying to boil the ocean. I was trying to think about how do I actually do it across everything. And I'd sort of failed even at that. Towards the end of my tenure, I think we came up with a good scenario where we decided not to focus on training, not singularly on training. We want to really focus on our Security Champions program. And with the Security Champions program, our goal is that we'll have an agenda and walk them through a bunch of trainings. And once they sort of get certified as a security champion, we'll get them to deliver the training so we can scale in that fashion. But I think my biggest problem was that I was still thinking about how do you scale things that are very difficult to scale. I hate computer-based training. It's just so impersonal. It's really hard to learn as a part of that. I definitely want to continue with instructor-led training and just run into problems that way.
For us, I think we got really successful with like service auth at Chime. We gave a pretty platform level solution for people to use, and other developers loved it. We try to expand that for other levels of auth, like member authorization and things in that sense. And I think we didn't listen enough to what really the problems were in the other spectrums of how authorization works. So member authorization is completely different from how service authorization works versus employee authorization, and trying to force a solution that necessarily didn't work for the developers for their use cases didn't really scale well for us. I think even though the same solution or the same platform did work for one of the use cases, it doesn't mean that it will work for all. And you just have to like be pragmatic and listen to what really the challenges are before you actually. I know it sounds silly and stupid, but we thought we understood it, and that's why we built it out. But in reality, that's not how the reality of the system was. So.
You want to be last, Julia?
You want to be
no,
last?
you don't want to be last.
That's fair. That's fair. I think one thing that was a particular challenge is kind of rolling out. Again, I think maybe both of you mentioned like anticipating things or the human element, right? Like I think that is really hard. And when we try to scale things, we think a lot about like how are we going to engineer this thing, but not how is it going to land on people. And security is maturing a lot, where like software engineering has had a little bit more time and structure. So like people like product managers, marketing managers, like these different roles that really make sure that these things roll out well and that they're communicated well, where we're just not like, we're cutting off your access because we didn't think you needed it anymore or something like that. And so to specific experience, I think rolling out kind of security guidance at scale with enough context to give people kind of this self-serve experience, like that turned into like operational bunch of questions and things that then my engineers had to like respond to in Slack, getting back to people because we hadn't maybe done enough of that work up front to be like, let's understand who we're talking to, what we're trying to get them to do, and is it clear enough? Because you are then hitting a whole bunch of people with a bunch of things all at once, and so then it comes back at you. Right. So doing the extra legwork up front, making sure you have the right people in the right places to do that work up front, so that you can kind of anticipate what that's going to be like.
Well, I'll just thank you for that, because one thing I'll plus one is that you have to treat, especially at scale, everything you do in your security team as a product. And if you're building production services, which I'll go ahead and argue everything you build, whether it's in production or whether it faces the developers in production, you need to have the right people in the room. So I won't use that example, so thank you. But what I will talk about is maybe like a notable failure for us, at least over the 5 years. I think everyone here has heard a talk about secure defaults at some point in their life and is probably real hyped on secure defaults. I'll just tell you, we never got hyped on secure defaults and never figured out how to do that at scale. We never figured out how to write static analysis rules at scale that were meaningful, because fundamentally, one, there's no database OWASP top 10, so there was like the domain we were in that made certain things challenging. And then two, from my earlier answer, I talked about engineering, your fate being tied to what engineering does. And in our early days, Snowflake allowed a lot of choice. And in the face of sprawling choice, it is very difficult to express invariants or opinions of any kind. And so it has actually taken us a very long time, not just as a security team, but as an organization, to get our arms around the sprawl, because it's a business imperative. And we've now started to be able to ship some things like Mukund is talking about, which we would consider secure defaults, like service-to-service auth, why we built another vault, I'll get into that another time, but like a high-performance secrets engine that runs in production. And so I'll say toward the tail end of things, we were getting successful and sort of had a vision for what we could build, but really struggled to do anything on that front for the majority of the time that we've been working on it.
Good answers. Thinking about sprawl, when you scale application security for enterprises, do you believe in a centralized security model where control is consolidated, or a decentralized model that allows business units autonomy? How do you balance between the two?
Okay,
It's your turn.
I think this is a tricky one, because you got to keep accountability where it belongs. That's fundamentally how you can scale the program. If you are accountable for their security, that's game over for you right there. So keeping accountability where it belongs is the hardest part, and that's where the crux of the problem is. And this can be solved by both ways. At Chime, we use a mixed approach. We have a centralized security team that's building things for the rest of the company and the developers who use. And we also have like embedded security engineers that are part of different teams, helping out the different embedded functions with their like specific domain problems. For example, we have a data security engineer, like Jacob mentioned, there isn't like a top 10 for data problems. So we have a data security engineer who's just like working with the data teams to figure out how do we do security for the data domain. Similarly, other embedded engineers on the team, but they are working with our centralized team to make sure that the bigger security team is building solutions that work for the majority of the use cases. That's kind of how the model works today.
We love it depends. I think it depends. I think that there has to be some things that are central, I think, to get some consistency for the information that you need to know to operate as a business and to know kind of as the CISO or as kind of the head of security what's going on in the different business units. But there's a lot of flexibility that comes with being embedded in a business unit. I was on one of those teams, and there was just a bunch of freedom to do all kinds of things, but and we got to kind of invent things and go really far because we had a lot of context on what that business was operating like, what were the things that they cared about, how were they building products, and how can we then go like embed in their processes and systems and make meaningful change. But I will also say that if you are not on a central security team, if your engineering leader at some point decides that security is not their top priority and you don't have kind of that support, then that does become very hard. And so I do think that I like a hybrid model, but I also think that like there has to be kind of like these strong dotted lines at the very least, and then whoever is, if you are an embedded team that truly reports up through a different vertical, like there has to be really strong relationships to the security team to make that successful in the long run.
Yeah.
Okay, well, my answer was already said. It's hybrid. So maybe I'll just elaborate on what, at least the mental model, however you view it. Maybe you've seen Fight Club, maybe you haven't. But I think what was kind of key about Fight Club is that all of the people in all of the places that you regularly visited that were part of your life across your whole life were members of a club, and they all had a secret goal. So you could say that the approach we took was to have what folks who've worked with me heard describe control both pieces of the chessboard and all of the pieces. So we have, a product I think in a product company, you're not going to be in good shape if you have a centralized security team, because the product will, I don't want to make like extreme assumptions here, but like a lot of product teams won't accept like contributions to the code base from outside of product. There's a lot of reasons why that might be a good idea, as a matter of fact. And so fundamentally being able to influence one, being able to contribute code, that's a basic thing, but two, security is really about psychology, and tribalism is a very real thing. And it is better to belong to the tribe you want to influence than to be like an invader. And it's even better if you are both a member of the tribe and you control the invaders. So I think that's kind of the approach we took. And now it's dangerous because there's a difference between like manipulation and influence. And so I'll give you the sort of answer that we use is like, what's best for Snowflake? It maybe sounds corny, but that's, try to engage with that process genuinely and do what's best for the other person and for the business. And it works pretty well. But I do find that, as Julia mentioned, if you don't have a partner, so for this hybrid model, you're paying kind of like a virtual team tax. And I think it's a worth it tax because you have accountability on both sides, and you have accountability with the business and engineering. But as she mentioned, if you don't have that, if you don't have a central security team, then you just have the fox guarding the hen house. And if there's no one to protect that type of situation, in other words, product has a perverse incentive to coerce the security person to move faster. I think that's a really bad model, actually.
Jacob, I don't think you're allowed to speak about Fight Club.
Yeah. Sorry, bad AppSec.
I think everyone's right. It depends. But the companies that I've worked for, I feel that having an embed or a democratized program has worked really well in itself. So really making sure that the security team's role is not as to provide all of the security knowledge to the engineering teams. I don't want that. From that standpoint, the central security program is dead. I really want to make sure that we allow our actual partners or risk owners, engineering in particular, to make their decisions. But we're there to support them and make sure that they're trending in the right direction. Doesn't necessarily mean that they get to have the final call. If there's something that's a line in the sand, we will absolutely make sure that they don't cross over that line sign. But I do want them to make the decisions because they're much deeper into their areas and they understand those problems. So definitely working at companies like Twilio, where they have a lot of acquisitions, it made a lot more sense there. And then now we're working at Rippling, I think we have 26 products or even more. I do want to make sure that I empower engineering leadership and leaders there to make the decisions, and we're there to hold them accountable for doing the right things.
When building and structuring application security teams, do you hire software engineers or security engineers more often? Maybe a hybrid. Let's hear more.
I think back to you now.
Okay, so lately it's software engineers. So the into that question is, will software eat security? And the answer is yes, but like there's a limit to that. And where the limit lies is, I think what I learned was that you have to respect software engineering for what it is and not ask security engineers to do that and put them in a tough spot where you're expecting them to know software engineering and they may not. And there's a second component of that, which is that risk decomposition is not the same thing as software engineering. And so if you really had to think about it, I think you end up with security architects and software engineers. And what security architects are really like are risk product owners. And that there is an art to being a product owner, so don't belittle your PM friends. There's something to that. But I think the whole risk decomposition process and understanding what is the control architecture we're trying to achieve is something that needs high-level experts to do, and they need to be paired with engineering teams who can bring that into the business.
You said it way better than I was going to say it. I have been hiring a lot more security engineers that have software backgrounds. Security will never grow as fast as engineering, and the only way that we can actually keep up is actually building out tooling, scaling our frameworks, building that pay path so that we can keep up with them in general. Having said that, I definitely noticed that there's a gap with the skill set there. And to Jacob's point, those product managers or those skills that TPM or someone that's really good at strategy is not as apparent with folks that come with a software background. So I definitely will be hiring more on the software engineering, security engineering background. But I do see a place for folks that come with strategy, know how to roll out large programs, know how to hold their stakeholders accountable. Typically, I think I will have probably a 1-to-4 ratio where 4 people with software security engineering backgrounds and 1 person at least on the strategy side.
Yes. Yeah, I think like similar to maybe what I had mentioned earlier, I think kind of pairing software engineering with somebody who's defining a problem and helping to define a solution so that the people who are building software can be really good at building software and really good at scaling that to solve the problem that's well defined for them and on that team. And so, yeah, I agree that there's kind of a hybrid, but we need people who are very good at building software, where I think previously it was like, can you code a little, can you script a little, but now it is like we need people who are software engineers and to pair them with the problem.
I think it's depending on what the function is. So for me, it's really like, okay, do I need more people to go on the offensive side, look for issues right now? Then I'll probably hire more security-focused based people. I do want to say that I do have the privilege of like experimenting a little in this area. I think we've hired like SRE engineers to come and help us with like infrastructure security. We've had data engineers to come and help us with the get a security problem. But I think I was belittling the amount of effort it'll take to onboard them into the security domain. I think I was initially under the assumption that it's going to be easy to teach them security stuff, but like you can't even talk to them about like go look up the OS software and they'll be like, what's that, right? Like there's a lot of assumptions being made that it's easier to teach someone that security stuff. So I think if you do have the privilege and if you do have a supportive team that will help you like onboard these people into the different domains, that's the right thing to do because the security space is just too small. Everyone's behind the right because the best talent. So.
How does the toxicity of certain team members or leaders affect the scalability of security solutions in a growing org? Can you share strategies for managing such challenges while maintaining security efficiency?
Spicy.
I went straight for it. I was going to add a little intro, but decided to just go for the kill.
Okay, so how does the toxicity of leaders and ICs?
team leaders or leaders. Team members or leaders.
Yeah, I really like to try working with people first and understanding their viewpoint on why we can't roll out certain programs or software or automations. And we'll run into problems. We'll absolutely run into problems. We'll find parts of the ecosystem that just doesn't want to get along. And I think some of the strategies that I've used is, first, try working with them, get buy-in from them. No, okay, let's go to, we can either escalate on their side and go to their managers or escalate on my side. But I have to make sure that I jump through the proper hoops. I have to make sure that the programs that I'm trying to running will actually work. I don't want to go through escalation, only find out this is not going to work, and then my street cred is going to go down further. So I do want to make sure that I have the metrics and the data that I need in order to fight this particular battle. But a lot of times, after escalating and making sure that all parties are on board, we'll have a decision. Sometimes I come out up front and it's good. We move forward. Sometimes they need more data and understanding why we really want to push forward with this program. And I'll try working through it. But there are times where nothing will happen. And that leads to anger, frustration, just uncertainty on team side. And if there is too many instances of that happening, I have left companies for it. Why hire me if I can't roll out security programs that are going to make large impacts? I'd rather go to places where that I can go out and just roll things out and get things done. Spicy answer.
I want names.
I think I need to get paid a lot more to say those names.
Who's going next? Me?
Yeah, you.
Okay. I actually love those kind of scenarios, to be honest. I think those are the most fun problems to work on. And I think that's, you kind of realize what breaks in your own program and what breaks in your own pitch, like when you're reaching out to people. And that actually helps me go back and redefine on how I should be selling this. Also try to understand why they're so sour, right? It's maybe because they just had all the previous jobs they worked on had really shitty security teams, and they just don't trust security folks anymore. So I try to take, okay, let's not talk about security. Let's talk person to person. Let's just understand what is it that you're trying to work on, and then have that relationship be built on. But yeah, there have been times even when none of that has worked, and then escalation, reaching out to my boss to talk to their boss. All of those are definitely scenarios that have helped. And actually, this is where you get in that buy-in from your C-level to say that, do they really think security is a priority? And if they do, and if that's what they really care, then this is a scenario where they prove that, that this is a priority for them, and they handle the situation.
There's so much assuming good intent here.
Yeah.
So you say toxic. I think that this is an interesting question because I think Jeevan and Mukund are doing the thing of assuming good intent, which is good, and we should. And so I do think I agree going to them and saying, can I understand what it is that you want, so that I can then figure out how to let you know how what I want might align with that outcome or how I can help you get there. I think that's kind of the primary thing. If they are kind of indeed a well-intentioned person who maybe is just being stubborn or standing in the way. I think, maybe true toxicity is really difficult, and it depends on kind of where they sit and what they're doing. But I agree, trying to work with them and figuring out how you can align goals and understand theirs, help them understand yours. I really do try to connect on a human level and be I am trying to do security here, and here's the reason why it's important for the company. Like what Jacob mentioned earlier, we say that a lot of Netflix do what's best for Netflix, and that is usually something that you can kind of connect on first, and then build backwards into how do we do that together, and why am I trying to influence something on your side and trying to connect on that as well.
So I'll maybe say talk about two themes that I've heard. And of course, you've heard the part about like the happy path where you go and engage with them and common interests in those things. And so Jeevan mentioned one thing that I think about a lot, which is like toxic people are everywhere. That's a fact of life, especially at scale. Bad intent is true at scale. Like lots of other things are true at scale that you don't necessarily plan for. So the thing I think about the most is how to protect my team from toxic people. So let's talk about toxic ICs. Like my message to my team, some of them are sitting here, so you can tell me if it's true or not, but like, we don't have time for that. You do plan A, and then it's like, okay, we shut it down. Because what it does is what Jeevan described. Your team quits and burns out because every day they're arguing with someone who really doesn't have authority to make this argument. So again, I want to just reiterate, you need to do all the nice stuff first. So I'm just going to give the other opinion on this. In the C-suite, that's a different thing, right? And if you're in a security team who doesn't have C-suite support, like RIP, I'll pour one out for you, but it's not going to be good. But in this case, it's like, this is what I talk about kind of the Fight Club thing, which is great. You know, like we have a risk here. We're going to be very sure that our risk, and we have the metrics as Jeevan mentioned and all those things, but like, okay, let's go explain to the board why we're not, you know what I mean? Like that never happens. So you just, the thing is whether or not you kind of have the courage to do it. People don't like conflict. So security is often about conflict. We may describe it as other things, but like ICs, let their managers deal with it. You know what I mean? Like do the right thing and then let the engineering orgs deal with their toxic ICs. Make it about those leaders and holding them accountable for not having a toxic org and for not having people, or rather an organization that's not taking security seriously. That's where I would rather focus my energy. But overall, managing up has a cost. And you really have to manage that cost because as an individual, it will wear on you, and on your team, it will eat them and destroy them in most cases.
So we've heard some stories in which engineers were bad partners to security and preventing scale. But are there any instances in which security was the real bottleneck or the toxic member in the performance of a product when run at scale? Any recommendations on how to navigate this space?
You're up first.
Never heard of it.
I don't want to lose my job. So. Yeah, I think there are like in my current place and previous places, there are a lot of like teams within security work completely different. Like I think my team is very transparent and shares everything, and we're like, if you don't share it with people, they're not going to know what to fix. Versus there are other teams that are more like, let's make sure if we do get into an issue, we don't have a lot of this on paper, or the just regular. And they are looking out for the company, I would say. But I think, in general, it is back to the instead of working with engineering, it's working with the security teams. I would say to make sure that the intent is clear, you know what you're doing, and then find a middle ground. But definitely there have been several instances where sometimes within the security org, there's a blocker to that.
We'll do a staggered approach this time. So I'm going to go ahead and answer, and Nathan's going to appreciate this. But yes, and Ariel, you will appreciate this as well, which is, so there's maybe two examples. The first example I'll mention is very current. We have a toxic out of SLA vuln Slack bot. Okay, I'm on every one of those Slacks, and like the hammer comes down every time, but like there's like 1,000 of those every day. Like that is toxic. Don't do that. And Ariel had a nice talk about don't do that. Don't be emailing people all the time. Do other things. The second thing is like a cool trick if you use it right, which was in the early days, there were just 2 of us doing security reviews, and everyone had to do security review. And so to build support for distributed security, we just kind of maintained that model for a little bit, kind of like saying, hey, people complain. So you just kind of like let the suffering build to a certain point, and then you give them the next thing. And it only buys you a certain amount of time. But if you're already operating in a bad model, you can kind of use the pain from your bad model to rationalize the next model.
So for me, for this particular answer, I usually think about the security engineering relationship. And I want to say as an industry, we're really bad many years ago where we would always say no, and we'd shut things down on the engineering side without actually providing them good solution forward. But I think over the last decade, we've done really well. We are engineers, and we think like engineers, and we provide solutions for engineers. So I think overall, as an industry, we've definitely approached it in a good way, and we're really partnering with folks in itself.
You do have the right political answer.
Vote for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've gotten a lot better as an industry, but you still do run into people who are kind of like toxically frustrated at everything around them in security. Anyone? No? No. And I think in that case, like I've seen that happen in a few instances, and that's tough because it's usually well-intentioned, like I wish that security was better around here, or I wish that people would just listen to me, I think is often like the underlying thing. Because you're well-intentioned and because you think that there could be a better world. And so I think of that usually as like maybe can show up toxically, but I'm like, oh, this is me assuming good intent. There's a good person in there who really is trying to make a difference. And so I think then it does happen in connecting with those folks on like ways that they can influence others, skills that they can build to bring the data to a conversation or connect with somebody in a way that makes their message more clear, because I think when the frustration comes out ahead, then they're not getting that alignment that they need to with their partner teams. And so, yes, certainly does happen. I think there's things that we can do as individuals to try and help that.
Right, depending on how quickly people answer this may be our last question. But what are some of the security tools that move the needle the largest in being successful at scaling programs?
I can start.
Yeah, you start.
Yeah, I know Eric and Ariel rolled out democratized vulnerability management. That's my favorite program that I've ever seen in my career. It's made the most impact. We're in the process of fully utilizing it at Rippling right now, where the goal is really making the risk owners actually own their security vulnerabilities. In order to do that, what we do is we make sure that security is not part of the process. We're looking at things at the aggregate, at the high level, and holding leaders responsible for their groups of vulnerabilities. But in reality, anyone can request for SLA extensions. I don't want to chase engineers. They can fix their own vulnerabilities. I don't want to be responsible for that. So what happens is that our P4, P5s, they get SLA extensions. If they ask for it, automatically approves. No one really cares about low information will right now. And then you go up. P3s, they have to be approved by directors. P2s have to be approved by VPs. P1s have to be approved by SVPs. And what we've noticed is, in the past, VPs were not really aware of the security technical debt that they owned. And once they see an extension come to their plate, they are like, okay, what's happening here? Why haven't we fixed this? And my favorite scenario of this is when P1 came to, P2 came to a VP. It came for a second time, and he asked the team, he's like, what's going on here? I've already approved this. Why hasn't this fixed? He's like, if anything goes wrong, it's my name there, and security is going to come after me for this. So he asked for the person that's going to fix it, how long they're going to require to fix it, and what the actual plan is before he's going to approve. They did that by the end of the day. They said, this person, this is the plan. It's going to take us 6 weeks. He approved it. It was done in a week and a half. It was done in a week and a half because no one was going to come back again for asking for another extension. So that's definitely been my favorite program, which is why I love focusing on that side of things. And I feel that it makes a huge, huge impact in the business.
Okay, I'll go. So maybe similarly like to democratized vuln management, I think everybody here has taken a democratized approach to AppSec or secure design review, probably like security champions or something else. But so I'll just briefly talk about our subtle variant to that, which is we hired 0 people to embed on any teams, and we have 0 volunteers. So instead what we did was think real hard about what we thought the limit of what every developer should do on security, which is maybe a little bit less than you might think. And then try to frame that as like, every developer owns security. You already get your code owned by a senior developer who is your peer reviewer. So make it about what the developer can reasonably do and what the senior developer can reasonably peer review, and that is kind of the space of what we allow teams to be autonomous with. And maybe that's kind of vague, but the point is like none of them do security for the other. Everybody does it for themselves, and we make it very lightweight for the partner so that there's no opportunity for it to become a cognitive offloading activity. And then what we try to kind of optimize for is when you don't know the answer, call us, and how to make that very obvious to them.
I forgot the question.
What made you scale best?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I will answer. So internally, we have built a system that understands a whole lot about all of our applications. And so when we go to tell them to do something, we have a reasonably good idea that what we're telling them to do represents risk to Netflix and means that they should take action. We value developer productivity very highly, and we consider interrupting them to be something that we will only do if we are pretty certain that they should change behavior or do something about it. And so by kind of bringing together all of these facts that we can observe about our applications and things, then we can bring that context with more confidence, and also with kind of the thousands of microservices that we have to kind of make those trade-offs, and we have to be well informed about them, because if we are, cutting 14,000 Jira tickets, we will not be able to answer questions about them at all. And so bringing all of those facts together is an internal tool that we've built that I think has really helped a lot.
I think I want to maybe quickly summarize my framework of this in general. I think in AppSec there are things you can solve by making sure it's part of the framework. And I think in general, programming frameworks have done this well. You don't think about XSS or CSRF or SQL injection anymore that often. There are things you can only detect by testing or tooling for that. And there are things you can do it neither. You have to do training. And training is the hardest. Scaling training is the hardest. I think Jeevan's spoken about that quite a bit. You can build tooling to detect a lot of your issues that are simple to fix, and you should be building those out. Simple sum grep rules will do for the most job. You don't need any fancy SaaS and things in that sense. And then always, just focus on whatever you can build at the platform level. I think, Julia mentioned, we also do have hundreds of microservices, if not thousands. So how do you ensure that all of them have the right configurations and how they're deployed and how they are getting patched, all of that stuff. So building the right developer tools for all of that. I'm conscious in saying developer tools and not security tools, because no developer is going to take the time to come log into your security tool and figure out how to work that thing out. They're going to want to find those issues where they are. So for instance, we give all those findings for their team on GitHub, because that's where our developers are. Similarly, we built the tool called Monocle, which I've written quite a bit and spoken quite a bit about, which kind of aggregates all that information to say, okay, you are a service owner for this service. Here are the 3 things you need to do, and each of these 3 things will take you 5 minutes to fix it. Yes, we could do it, but we're not going to do it for hundreds of these services. So that's why we need you to come and do it for you.
Great. Well, we only have 2 minutes left. Don't think we can answer another question. Okay, so thank you everyone so much for being engaged, and thank you to our panelists for a great discussion on scaling.